Let's talk about our time at the University of the Philippines. That was an interesting time. It was extremely hot and extremely humid. The evenings cooled off, but the bed bugs about devoured me. And the Filipino roommates that I had, they taught me how you have to kill a bed bug. Well, you got to get it between your fingernails and crush that baby. But I remember those first 3 weeks, I just felt like I was sweating my life away at night. We had mosquito net over us, 4 in a room, 4 chairs to desk, and 2 bunk beds. I went to visit there 3 years ago. It hasn't changed. From 1964, it's still the same. But I didn't realize that the University of the Philippines is the top university in the Philippines, and that's where all the lawyers and doctors and businessmen go. So it was a good year, hot and humid. People don't remember, but that was the time when Goldwater was running for president against Johnson in 64, and I was the only person voting for Goldwater. I had a couple Fulbright professors, not because I was a Fulbright scholar, but because they happened to be there, and I took courses from the one in Southeast Asian government, which was great, a guy named Butwell, a guy named Meadows from Georgetown University. I was the only person there, the entire university. There were a number of Americans, not that many, but I was the only one voting for Goldwater, and my professor said, there's going to be a Filipinos for Goldwater meeting in the phone booth of the Commander drugstore. Here I am in 2024, just so discouraged by the hatred and anger of the left and the right. In those days, we would differ, but we could joke around and laugh with one another, but those days are surely gone. But it was a great year. I was having Bible studies almost every night. They kind of tolerated that. It's a Catholic university, but there's no Catholic teaching. Everything's Catholic in the Philippines. So I would have Bible studies, and 8 or 10 guys would come, and I was just, for weeks, I was having Bible studies, and they'd all just walk away, and they were kind of an intellectual group of people. And one day, a young guy who I knew was in that dorm with me, his name was Bonifacio Arzadon. In the Philippines, the name Bonifacio would be like Abe Lincoln or George Washington to us. He stuck around January of 64 on the steps of the engineering building. It's a long story, but he became a Christian. He trusted Christ. And I left, and I didn't think he was going to amount to much. He was not growing that much as a Christian. I was running him through the topical memory system. But when I left and went home, Gene Tabor discipled him. Today, Bonifacio, is the head of an organization in Los Baños in the Philippines known as Lakas Angkan, the strength of the clan. And he heads an organization of 32,000 people. And I was there for a conference of their key cell leaders 5 years ago of 1,800 people. And they thought I was the spiritual grandfather. I mean, in some senses, I guess I was. And so there, the Filipinos girls would take their hand and my hand and put it on their forehead. Like, you're our spiritual grandpa. And I was kind of like, in the New Testament, where is it Paul or Peter, they're renting their clothes. Do not worry. I'm not the guy. I didn't do that good a job. In fact, until I learned later how God had blessed Bonnie, I would have looked back at that year as very mediocre and really not really that great spiritually. But again, I would say to them, you need to think about the person that God really used, Rod Sargent, way back then, looking at me and just saying 5 words, are you ready? And over again, it seems in my life that 5 words have made a real difference. The Philippines, though, apart from Bonnie, my roommate, Gene Tabor, when I was going through a time of doubt and discouragement toward the last months, he took me up into the mountains and he just listened to me for 3 days. He didn't preach at me. He just listened. So gradually I came back to the Lord, and I was not in an utter rebellion, but I was very discouraged. My roommate was a guy named June Uriarte, who's become very famous. He went to Carnegie Mellon to get his doctorate. He has served 5 different presidents in the Philippines of the country. He's been on the cabinets. He's a very sincere pro-life Catholic. I've seen him a couple times since, and just so thrilled that I knew him and got to know him. I was there 1 year. The brown skin looked less brown. I'm 21, 22, I'm all alone. And there were a couple gals I really liked. But in the Philippines, I am so grateful that I was raised in what would be known as a fundamentalist home. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't dance. there was what we would call today a fast crowd at the University of the Philippines. These were gals they were fast, and I'm 22 years old, but they just turned me off. And I never went to bars, etc. The gals that were attractive to me were like the conductoras on the bus or the waitresses. So there were two gals that I liked, one named Luningning and another named Hilda Hilongos. I never as much as touched them. In fact, they wouldn't go out with an American. Never held their hand, hardly got close to them, because, well, number one, they're a Catholic country, but two, the Second World War, with all the GIs there, had left so many unwed mothers and babies, and so the Filipinos said, don't get near an American. So I was, kind of admiring them from afar. I had one date, and I had to take the girl's aunt with me, and I had to have a friend with me, make sure I have enough chaperones so she wouldn't look like she's like a fallen woman by dating an American. But that was an interesting thing about that culture. I had no money, and I'm about to go home. I was taught by my parents, you don't borrow money. You just don't borrow money. So, how am I going to get home? I went down to Manila Harbor, and I sat in a bar, and I drank Coca-Cola, waiting for someone to come along. The reality is, I'm down there, I don't have a penny, I've got to get home. And a sailor walks in, some sailors from Norway. And the Norwegians, the Swedes, they speak English well. The Europeans do. And his name was Steinar Kaval, I will never forget. We sat down talking. He was the radio operator on this ship sitting out in the Manila Harbor. And what are you up to? And I said, well, I'm trying to get home. And we talked. He said, hey, come on out with me. They have like a speedboat that goes out to the ship because the ship can't come in that far. And he said, I'll talk to my captain. We climb up the rope ladder, and I'm standing there barely on the ship. He goes to the Norwegian captain. The Norwegian captain comes over, and he says, what are you up to? And I'm trying to get back to the States. He says, I'm sorry, we're only going to Vancouver. I said, Vancouver? I'll go to Vancouver. I got on that ship for free. I had to clean the pilot's cabin. It was full of San Miguel beer bottles. That's all I had to do was clean that cabin. So 17 days to Vancouver, all my food for free, never paid a penny. Again, God just protected me in situations like that. So that was an amazing trip. I had two suitcases. I had one suitcase of all my regular clothes. I had another suitcase with Filipino stuff. I mean, what they call the Barong Tagalog, which is that white, nice shirt they wear. I had every single memento in that suitcase. Greyhound bus came from Vancouver to Portland. Got off the bus in Portland. We were changing buses, took my suitcases off, went to the phone booth, and I called one of my friends at Multnomah Bible College because we were at Glen Erie together. While I'm talking to him on the phone, someone stole my suitcase. Only one suitcase. But which one did they steal? Not my old clothes. They stole everything related to the Philippines. Again, I think in the providence of God, that was how the Lord preserved me for Kathy, because with that went all the Filipino memories. It still took a while. I still write letters to those girls for a month or two. I had not met Kathy then. But again, you can imagine the feeling. The bus is taking off to the east. I can't go around looking for it. It's been stolen. It's gone. It was heartbreaking. But again, God directs all these things and was cutting the ties from the Philippines with those girls, though they really weren't great ties. So that's the Philippine experience. I actually can say Tagalog words better than I can Mandarin words, because Tagalog is pretty, it's not tonal oriented, and it got Spanish influence in it. But that was a great, great year. And how did that happen? One guy said to me, are you ready to go? And I'm thankful that he did.